What are the basic elements of the story that we know? We have character, we have plot, we have setting, and we have theme. Now, one of the biggest things that I'm finding a lot of newer writers are struggling with is the balance between plot and character. And that is going to be the focus of this video today. Writing a story is one big, prolonged, painful, hair-pulling juggling act. You have to balance all of the elements I just listed. Before you can even do that, you have to decide whether or not you want your story to be more plot-driven or more character-driven. However, I'm gonna say this is a false choice because every story is character-driven. But before we even get to that, let's first discuss what is a character and what is a plot. It seems ridiculous and pretty self-explanatory, but it's important. Character. These are the people or the animals or the aliens we follow, or whoever the active component of our story is. To be honest, some writers, if they're really good, can even make setting a character. They can make objects a character. Anything can be a character so long as it's doing something. So then what's the plot? The plot, at its simplest, is just the series of events that unfold throughout the run of the story. Something happens, and then this causes something else to happen. And then way over there, something else is happening as a result. That's a plot. So now you might be saying, well, don't the two things work hand in hand? Yes, we're gonna get there. But first, let's go back to character versus plot-driven story. A character-driven story really focuses on the internal change of the character, right? So we are going to be spending a lot of time in the character's head. We're gonna be learning about what makes them tick, their inner turmoils, their problems, their aspirations, all those things. And we are going to watch a progression. It's all about how the character develops. Plot-driven is actually a whole lot more externalized. It's about the things that are going on in the world outside. Think of Tolkien's works, such as The Lord of the Rings. Very plot-driven. We don't get to spend a whole lot of time inside of the characters' heads. We get a lot of battles, which are told from a very historian-type distance. We're not going into the head of some soldier or Gandalf or Frodo and understanding their take on the battle, or as they wrestle with existential ennui. I think one of the big problems that a lot of new writers are running into is they have a plot, or they have an idea for a story, or they have an idea for a character, and they can't mesh the two together. Essentially, they feel like the plot is fighting the character, or the character is fighting the plot. Either way, there's a disconnect there. Or they notice that the story just isn't working and they can't put their finger on why, because it's got lots of cool stuff going on. Explosions, aliens, exploding aliens, dinosaurs, exploding alien dinosaurs, but they don't know why it's just not quite clicking. But first of all, back to what I was saying about all stories being character-driven stories. A character that does nothing is actually really boring. If you have a character that is always responding to things and just doesn't do anything, that's not a character. It's not even a puppet. It's barely even a cardboard cutout. All you have there is a cipher that the reader can experience the world through. But I'm gonna argue that characters are the things your readers are actually showing up for. Yes, they love the exploding dinosaurs. Yes, they love the exploding alien dinosaurs. They love all that. Don't get me wrong. We do want excitement. We do want forward motion. We want momentum. But really what anchors us into the story, any good story, is the character. We have to care about this. You know, believe it or not, Dr. Cox, as much as he is a personal hero of mine, is not totally correct when he says that people are bastard-covered bastards with a creamy bastard filling. Actually, it's in our very nature to care very deeply about other human beings, to want to know more about them and to want to understand them. And so, if you don't give your readers a character that they can care about, or that they at least want to know more about, guess what? You don't really have a story. You have a series of events that are transpiring around what amounts to not much more than a camera. Meta. But now you might say, well, what about plot-driven stories where things are happening and it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the internal struggle of the character? It's not about that. This isn't Wuthering Heights. I don't give a damn. I just want shit to explode. Well, even there, we have characters. We have characters we care about. And I'm gonna give you the best example that pops into my mind. And that would be the original Star Wars trilogy. That is perfect example of a plot-driven story. We had the Jedi, we had the Empire, we had Darth Vader, we had Boba Fett, we had X-Wings fighting in space, we had lightsaber battles. We had no idea that we were gonna get slammed with Jar Jar Binks. Anyway, back to the point. Plot-driven story, yes. Characters we cared about, yeah, you bet your ass. Tell me we were not invested in Luke Skywalker's journey. Tell me we weren't invested in the transition of Han Solo from scruffy nerf herder to total badass swooping in to save Luke Skywalker at the last second at the Battle of the First Death Star. Tell me we did not care about their growth and their progression as characters. Not only that, and this is really important, those characters, as they progressed, made decisions every step of the way. They chose to do things, and these things had ramifications. Yes, you could argue that Empire Strikes Back was actually much more character heavy because we got to see Luke go through his training. We learned a whole lot more about his psychology, how he had that certain edge that predisposed him towards the dark side because of his impatience and his passion and all that stuff, and that was something he was going to have to get under control if he was ever going to become a Jedi. But even then, the story was at least moving forward in other areas, with Leia and Han and Lando on Cloud City. So again, the plot was moving forward. And then when Luke happened to realize that his friends were in trouble, this was the plot imposing on the character. But then again, because character is story, Luke made the decision to go to Cloud City and ended up confronting Vader, and thus the plot moved forward. We didn't spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes just going through what's going on inside of Luke's head. He acted. He made a choice and he acted. So yes, we got to see the externalization of his turmoil, which is, again, going with plot, but we also had the character doing something. And this is the crux of it. If your characters don't do anything, you don't have a story. You have a scenario. You have a travel guide. We get to look, but everything that's happening doesn't really have a linchpin to hold our attention. That linchpin is our character, or characters, or exploding dinosaur aliens. Which, please don't take that idea, I may want to use that in the future. So back to one of the big things that haunts a lot of newer writers is you have a story and your character wants to do one thing, but your plot demands something else. So what do? If you have been listening to what I was saying, what you know you need to do is you have to let your character make the decision. You have to let the character make the decision based on his or her history of decision making, their internal states, their proclivities, their failings. That decision can only come from the character. What happens if you say, well, character be damned, I want this plot point. The spaceship has to explode. The car has to go off the cliff. The person has to pull the trigger. But let's say the character doesn't want to blow up the spaceship or drive the car off the cliff or pull the trigger. Now what we have is a character acting out of character. And readers are going to pick up on this. Readers are actually very clever. They know when something doesn't feel right. And they know this because we all know human beings. We're surrounded by human beings. Most of us are human beings. Some of us may be reptiles dressed as human beings, but that's a whole other issue. We know that human beings tend to act fairly consistently. Now you may be saying, well, in a character study, sometimes the characters don't act consistently. Yes, but this is because when we have characters in a character study, they tend to be more on the three-dimensional side. In other words, they tend to act paradoxically. And that can be said of a lot of us. How many times in your own life have you done something that surprised everyone around you, that surprised yourself? This is because all human beings at their core are a paradox. However, most of the time, if you've been doing your work, you've set up the possibility for paradox. Even if it's something oh so slight as a character reaction, a throwaway line, you plant that in the brain of your reader. Whether they know it or not, they're going to remember that. And when your character does something that's seemingly out of character, it's not going to be the huge shock because you've prepared them. However, if you've created a character that is entirely pacifist and that has been consistently pacifist with no clues of some looming, lurking darkness in the pit of their soul, and then you just have this totally pacifist character who wouldn't hurt a fly, all of a sudden pull the trigger, that is going to ring entirely hollow with the reader. And they're going to call you on it. And all of a sudden now, suspension of disbelief has been broken. Because the reader knows the characters aren't characters. They're not people that we can relate to. They are devices that are being used to accomplish plot points. So what do you do about this? What do you do? How do you balance character and plot? The simplest answer, really, and what this has all been leading up to, is character is plot. It's really simple. Yes, you can have a scenario that kind of sets your plot in motion. Something happens and now my character has to respond. But they have to respond. And whatever they have to respond, we as the writers have to be okay with it, because yes, we're recording it, but let's remember, we're not the star of the show. No one gives a damn about us. No, people care about the characters. That's what they're here for. They care about what they're going to do. And if you start forcing your character to do things, it will ring hollow, and then the story will ring hollow, and it will be more hollow than Hollow Earth theory. And we don't want that. We don't want to deprive the reader, because the reader is here for a journey that they're going to experience through the character, but even more importantly, they're here to experience the character's journey. We read because, again, we're interested in other people. We're interested in ourselves. How many times do we look at someone else and we wonder, what would I do in that person's shoes? How would I react? I mean, unless you're a total sociopath, I mean, that's, more power to you, I guess. Just, But don't corral your characters. Don't force them to do things that are out of their nature. Understand what your character wants. Understand what your character needs. Understand what your character will do in a situation, and then let that character do it. And that will create the plot, because, again, plot is nothing more than cause and effect. One thing happens, chain to another, down the line until completion. And if you let the character decide what happens next, you let the character be the one to call the shots, you'll still get your plot. It might not be what you imagined, but it will be genuine. And that's what people are showing up for. That's why people are still reading books. It's an opportunity to meet someone, to see the world through their eyes, to see how they would handle something. And then, of course, we compare it to ourselves, what we would do. But if the character acts so hollow, then there's nothing left to grab onto. And if there's nothing left to grab onto, there's no reason to keep reading. So I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope some of this has proved helpful. If it has, leave a comment below. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in the future. And of course, remember to like and subscribe to this channel. That way, when there are new uploads, you'll know about it. All right, thank you. Keep writing.